Trepanation, the ancient brain surgery. Welcome to the bizarre world of ancient medicine, where your headache might just lead to brain surgery. Yes, folks, we're talking about trepanation, the practice of drilling holes into your skull to release evil spirits. Because nothing says healthcare like a hole in your head. Imagine complaining about a migraine, and instead of an aspirin, you get a hole in your head. Trepanation was believed to cure everything from epilepsy to mental disorders. Our ancestors thought that if you had a problem, the best solution was to give your brain some fresh air. It's like rebooting your computer, but way more painful, and without the guarantee that it'll actually work. The procedure was often performed with primitive tools like flint, obsidian, or even seashells. Precision instruments of the ancient world, ladies and gentlemen. And don't worry about anesthesia, they didn't have any. The best you could hope for was a strong drink and someone to hold you down. The community often gathered to watch these surgeries, turning it into a kind of public spectacle. Who needs Netflix when you have live brain surgery? It's the ultimate reality show, Survivor, Ancient Edition. Nowadays, we prefer methods that don't involve turning your skull into Swiss cheese. Neurosurgery has come a long way since then. We now use highly sophisticated equipment and, most importantly, anesthesia. Astonishingly, many patients survive these procedures and live to tell the tale. Some even showed signs of improvement, which might explain why this practice persisted for thousands of years. But let's be real. It's hard to tell if they felt better or just forgot what their initial problem was after getting a hole drilled into their head. I think I'll stick to my painkillers and regular checkups, thanks. Bloodletting, the all-purpose solution. Picture this. You walk into your local medieval barber surgeon's shop with a minor ailment, maybe a mild fever or a touch of melancholy. Instead of a soothing cup of herbal tea or a reassuring pat on the back, you're promptly seated, and out comes the razor. Welcome to the all-purpose solution of yesteryear, bloodletting. The theory behind this medieval marvel was simple, yet profoundly misguided. Ancient physicians believed that our bodies were governed by four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. An imbalance of these humors was thought to be the root cause of all illnesses. And what better way to restore balance than by draining some of that pesky excess blood? It's like deciding that the best way to fix a leaky pipe is by getting rid of the water altogether. Imagine the scene. A line of patients, each with an arm extended over a bowl, their life's essence dripping steadily away. It's a bit like a donation drive, except no one's walking away with a cookie and a juice box afterward. Instead, they're likely to feel faint and wonder why they ever thought this was a good idea. The barber surgeon, a multi-talented individual who also cut hair and pulled teeth, assured them it was all for their own good. After all, who needed all that blood sloshing around inside them, causing mischief? For more serious cases, they might bring out the big guns, leeches. These little bloodsuckers were the medieval equivalent of a multi-purpose tool, used to draw blood from places the barber's razor couldn't reach. And let's not forget cupping, another delightful method where heated glass cups were placed on the skin to create suction, pulling blood to the surface. The resulting bruises were seen as a sign that the treatment was working, or at least that something was happening. The fun didn't stop there. Bloodletting wasn't just for the ill, it was also prescribed as a preventive measure. Feeling perfectly fine? Better come in for your regular bloodletting session to keep those humors in check. It's a bit like going to the gym, but with a lot more blood loss and a lot less sweating. Mummy powder, the original multivitamin. Imagine this. You're feeling a bit under the weather, perhaps with a sore throat or a lingering cough. Instead of reaching for some honey and lemon, your ancient apothecary prescribes a hearty dose of ground-up mummy. Yes, you heard that right. Mummy powder was all the rage in ancient times, particularly among the Egyptians and later, even the Europeans. The belief was that mummies, being preserved for eternity, held powerful medicinal properties. Consuming their powdered remains was thought to transfer these life-preserving benefits to the living. It's the ultimate recycling program, though not quite in the way we think of recycling today. Picture an ancient apothecary shop, jars and bottles filled with all sorts of exotic and, frankly, bizarre ingredients. In a dark corner, there's a mortar and pestle dedicated to grinding mummies into fine dust. The apothecary, with a look of utmost seriousness, carefully measures out a spoonful of this ghastly powder as if he were handling the finest spice. He hands it over with a solemn nod, convinced that this macabre remedy will do the trick. The patient, on the other hand, might not be as enthusiastic. Consuming mummy powder was, to put it mildly, an acquired taste. It was often mixed with other ingredients to make it more palatable, though one can only imagine the mental hurdle of knowing you're ingesting the remains of someone who lived thousands of years ago. Talk about history coming alive, literally. It wasn't just the Egyptians who were enamored with this grisly treatment. By the Middle Ages, Europeans had picked up the practice, believing it could cure everything from headaches to more serious ailments like epilepsy. Wealthy nobles would pay handsomely for a jar of mummy powder, convinced it was the key to good health and longevity. It's like taking a multivitamin today, but with a significantly higher ick factor. Despite its widespread use, there's no evidence that mummy powder actually had any medicinal benefits. If anything, it might have done more harm than good. But in an era where medical knowledge was limited and superstition ran high, people were willing to try just about anything. Gladiator blood, the original energy drink. In ancient Rome, if you were feeling a bit low on energy or perhaps lacking in bravery, the solution wasn't a shot of espresso or an inspiring pep talk. No, the answer lay in the blood of gladiators, those iconic fearless warriors of the Colosseum. Yes, folks, drinking gladiator blood was believed to transfer their strength and courage to the drinker. It's the ancient equivalent of chugging a protein shake made by Hercules himself. Imagine the grand spectacle of a gladiatorial fight, the roar of the crowd, the clash of weapons, and the inevitable gruesome end for some unfortunate combatants. After the dust settled, enterprising Romans would collect the blood from the fallen gladiators, bottling it up like the finest vintage wine. It's a grisly sight to imagine, but for many Romans, this was the ultimate elixir of life. The logic, if we can call it that, was straightforward. Gladiators were revered for their strength and valor, so consuming their blood was thought to imbue the drinker with similar qualities. It's a bit like believing that by eating a lion's heart, you'd gain the courage of a lion, though significantly less sanitary and a lot more unsettling. Picture a bustling Roman market where vendors hawk everything from fresh produce to exotic spices. Among the stalls, there's one selling small vials of gladiator blood, promising instant vigor and bravery. Customers queue up, eager to partake in this potent potion, imagining themselves ready to take on any challenge that comes their way. It's the ancient world's version of an energy drink, with a lot more iron and a somewhat questionable aftertaste. Even the more squeamish Romans found ways to incorporate gladiator blood into their lives. Physicians of the time might mix it with other ingredients, creating a tonic that was a bit more palatable, though no less strange. The elite class, always on the lookout for the latest health craze, would pay handsomely for these blood-infused concoctions, convinced they were tapping into a secret source of power. Of course, modern science tells us that drinking human blood is not only unnecessary but downright dangerous. The potential for disease transmission alone makes it a non-starter. Yet, in the context of ancient Rome, it made a sort of twisted sense. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and in a world where survival often hinged on brute strength, the allure of gladiator blood was hard to resist. Animal dung, nature's band-aid. Picture this. You're living in ancient Egypt, and you've managed to slice your hand while working on one of those impressive pyramids. Instead of a sterile bandage or antiseptic cream, the local healer reaches for the nearest pile of crocodile dung. With a look of utmost seriousness, they slather it onto your wound, assuring you that it will not only stop the bleeding, but also prevent infection. You, perhaps less convinced, can only grimace and hope they know what they're doing. The logic behind this earthy treatment was that the dung's natural properties would draw out toxins and promote healing. It's a bit like believing that rubbing dirt in a wound will clean it, except this dirt happens to have come from an animal's rear end. Surprisingly, there might have been a kernel of truth in this method. Some animal dung contains antibacterial substances, though it's a gamble whether you'd get the helpful kind or just a nasty infection. In ancient Egypt, crocodile dung was particularly popular, possibly because crocodiles were seen as powerful creatures. Using their dung was thought to harness some of that power for healing. It's a stretch, but in a world where medicine was as much about symbolism as science, it made a certain kind of sense. Lizard dung, sheep dung, and even human excrement were also in the medical arsenal, each with its own supposed benefits. Now imagine the scene in an ancient healer's hut. Shelves lined with jars of various animal droppings, each carefully labeled. Patients come in with cuts, bruises, and more serious injuries, all trusting in the healer's expertise. It's a far cry from today's sterile clinics, but for our ancestors, this was cutting-edge medicine. Applying dung to wounds wasn't limited to the Egyptians. The Greeks and Romans had their own versions of this treatment, often mixing the dung with honey or other substances to create a sort of ancient neosporin. It's a testament to human ingenuity and desperation that such methods were not only tried, but sometimes revered. Mercury, the medieval cure-all. Step into the shoes of a medieval patient suffering from a mysterious ailment. Maybe it's a persistent cough, or perhaps something more serious like syphilis. The cure prescribed? A generous dose of mercury, the shimmery, silvery liquid metal. Yes, Back in the day, mercury was considered a magical cure-all, believed to purge the body of evil humors and toxins. It's as if someone looked at a thermometer and thought, this looks healthy enough to drink. Mercury, also known as quicksilver, was a cornerstone of medieval medicine. Alchemists and physicians believed it had potent healing properties. Imagine walking into an apothecary's shop and seeing rows of vials filled with this shimmering substance. The apothecary, in all seriousness, hands you a vial with instructions to take a few drops daily. You look at it, wondering if you're supposed to drink it or use it to polish your silverware. The rationale behind this gleaming treatment was the idea that mercury's liquid state could balance the body's humors, cleanse impurities, and even extend life. It's the medieval equivalent of a superfood smoothie, albeit with a significantly higher risk of poisoning. Mercury was used to treat a wide range of conditions, from digestive issues to skin diseases, and most famously, syphilis. The thinking was, if it's strong enough to melt gold, it must be strong enough to kill off disease. In practice, however, the cure was often worse than the disease. Patients who ingested mercury frequently experienced severe side effects like tremors, memory loss, and, in extreme cases, death. It's as if you went to the doctor for a cold and walked out with a prescription for arsenic. Despite these drawbacks, mercury remained popular for centuries. Physicians were convinced they were on the cutting edge of medical science, even as their patients wasted away from mercury poisoning. The application of mercury wasn't limited to ingestion. It was also used topically in ointments and salves. Imagine rubbing a mercury-based cream on your skin, rash, only to find that your skin starts peeling off. Or inhaling mercury vapors as part of a treatment for respiratory issues, wondering why you suddenly feel lightheaded and confused. Today we know better. Mercury is recognized for its toxic properties, and its use in medicine has been abandoned in favor of safer, more effective treatments. Modern medications undergo rigorous testing to ensure they don't do more harm than good. The idea of using a substance as dangerous as mercury seems ludicrous to us now, but it's a reminder of how far medical science has come.